Hello and welcome to an examination of the economic and political repercussions of the 2008 financial crisis on Venezuela. So to begin our project, Garrett and I'm John. Garrett is my partner, but he's not able to attend this recording. This project that we've done really highlights the policies adopted by the Venezuelan government during and after the 2000 financial crisis and the ensuing breakdown of democracy. In this case, it's really interesting to look at how economic uncertainty creates uncertainty in the population, and thus rulers that would have otherwise remained democratic, they begin to drift towards authoritarian rule, and then in Hugo Chavez's case, became a dictator. As the public is really aiming, they lose their sense of stability, whether it be economic or political stability. They look for a source, and this is where dictators like Chavez can find it and manipulate the public and to infiltrate the government and create policies that would have otherwise never passed. So, our key findings: in the year following the 2008 financial crisis, President Hugo Chavez clamped down his authoritarian control over the banks in Venezuela. In an anti-democratic move, Mr. Chavez threatened to nationalize the entire banking system if bankers did not obey the law. As you can see in the United States, the reality being reported out by an executive branch often doesn't mirror reality itself. And this is a case that was mirrored in 2008 by Chavez. The banks weren't breaking any laws necessarily, they just weren't performing very well because the world was in turmoil. And he saw this as an opportunity to clamp down control. And he then took control of the banks and nationalized them. This was an attempt to stabilize their economy. However, the national control, as you can see in our graph under conclusions, the boulevard has lost most of its value. So Chavez was able to take these steps towards dictatorship through his wing of PR, right? His spin doctors, Chavismo. They were able to spin the workings of the government so that the public had large public approval because they were being fed this reality that was the world's against us. Only the Venezuelan government can prevent economic disdain, and yet Chavez wasn't able to fix it. However, his wing, Chavismo, was able to really influence the public towards supporting his goals. How was all of this possible? His erosion of democracy, his nationalization of large banking institutions. This was all possible because, as I've stated earlier, economic uncertainty brings uncertainty in all realms. As people lose their sources of income, they look to find new ways to make money, new ways to feed their families, and this can lead to distrust of the systems as they were, as we're seeing now with mass unemployment. There's a level of uncertainty that then gets placed on the political leaders, and political leaders like Chavez, or you'd hope that others in the West wouldn't display such dictatorial tendencies. This is really where they can begin to both display and capitalize on the uncertainty to implement their plans towards dictatorship. However, as anybody that has looked at Venezuela in the past 20 years, Chavez isn't the only factor. Chavez was not the only factor in that there was a large social burden placed on leaders in Venezuela. Venezuela was heralded as a model democracy in a region that was fraught with dictatorships. They were the oldest democracy in Central America, Central and Southern America, and they've been around since 1958. So they were heralded throughout the world as, look, it's possible to have a democracy in the global South. However, Chavez was simply the catalyst that thrust Venezuela into dictatorship. Despite their vast differences, Hitler, Mussolini, and Chavez followed routes to power that share striking similarities. Not only were they outsiders with a flair for capturing public attention, but each of them rose to power because establishment politicians overlooked the warning signs and either handed over power to them or opened the door for them. So as you can see, Chavez was the symptom of a disease that was a public that was unhappy with their status in life, and the 2008 financial crisis simply just thrust that into the limelight, and Chavez was able to capitalize and implement his dictatorial reign. Now, however, following the 2008 financial crisis and the rebound around the world, Chavez passed away, and I think 2013, and his successor, Nicolas Maduro, has taken the dictatorial realm of Maduro's policies, and he's dialed it to 11. As you can see with Donald Trump in the United States, Maduro has attributed his country's problems to what he calls, well, this isn't related to Trump, but he's become anti-global influence, much like Trump and other populists, claiming that the reason that there are problems with his country is due to outsiders or foreigners, and then find a scapegoat and then place blame on them while they are consolidating power behind their office and their position. So in a quote from the New York Times again, Mr. Maduro attributes the country's problems to what he calls an economic war waged against Venezuela by the United States. But most economists place the blame on poor government management, corruption, and broken policies, like tight controls over foreign exchange and an overvalued currency and price controls on goods. So as you can see, Chavez wasn't the only one. His successor and his whole government, in fact, are symptomatic of dictatorial regimes. In 2019, in July, Maduro is still in power. He was recently up for election. The election results are being disputed because, surprise, Maduro won. But people are claiming that there was a mass effort to both place votes and silence opposition so that he could remain in power, which anybody that started a dictatorship can tell you is exactly what dictators do. To stay in power, they try to take place a facade of democracy in order to assure people that, look, you have the choice to vote for somebody else. You're not going to, but you have that choice to. Anyway, so Maduro is still in power, and in July 2019, the UN Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, concluded that Maduro's security and intelligence apparatus use widespread and arbitrary repression of civil society and the democratic opposition. For example, the July 5th United Nations OHCHR report noted at least 7,523 instances of extrajudicial killings. That's mind-boggling, right? For a country that heralds itself as a democracy, this is not democratic. Extrajudicial killings or murders, that's not acceptable. Now, this is where you really begin to see the impacts. They never recovered from the 2008 financial crisis, and thus, as the economy is unstable, society becomes unstable because nobody's sure of where to get their next meal. And this results in abuse of the systems in place to have judicial responses, and dictators like Nicolas Maduro are abused such that 7,500 people have died because of his influence. So, Garret and I's conclusion: as Venezuela's economy experienced greater economic strife, the government was able to take more drastic action, threatening its democracy. When considering relevant concepts such as globalization, the media's influence, and regional issues, it becomes clear that Venezuela's backslide into authoritarianism was inextricably linked to not only the national economy, but the global economy's slide into a recession. So, as Venezuela's economy experienced greater strife, they were then in a place that dictators such as Chavez and Maduro were able to really take power, and they were then able to influence the government over to be a dictatorship. Hopefully this is not something that we will be seeing in the United States following the inevitable economic downturn of the COVID quarantine. However, it is definitely something to keep an eye out for. Those of us that are in a position that we can look at history and find relevant dates and relevant events, we really need to keep our eyes out to watch and say, hey, is that really in the realm of acceptable? Do we consider this to be a part of democracy? Yeah, thank you for listening and following along in this presentation. I'd like to give a thank you to Matthias Vogel. He was a really big influence and helper in this. Yeah, thank you again for watching. I hope you learned something. And yeah, thank you.